Stories are important. It's how we get to know each other. When we meet someone for the first time, we spend a lot of time telling our stories. We ask about our marriages, or we ask about where we went to college, and where we grew up, and what our work is, and we start to tell stories. Stories are also ways in which we deal with our grief. Stories are the way in which we share our lives with each other. And this is particularly true for fellow strugglers. We need to hear each other's stories. But what everyone needs to understand is not all the stories are the same. Not all the stories have the same trauma, same problems, same struggles, and same suffering. We each have different stories because our paths on the sea are very different. But here's what I want everyone to hear. At least this is true for me. It's very difficult for me to hear what other people want to speak into my life when they have no clue about how my life played out, or have no clue about how suffering played out in my life. When someone who has not suffered tries to speak into my life and interpret what is going on and what God is doing, I shut down. Because they have no credibility with me. They haven't suffered. They haven't walked the path. So where I want to begin with you in this series is I want to tell you my story. But I want you to know that some of the hard things I might say and some of the difficult things that are written in the book that you might scratch your head and say, wow, really? He believes that? They come from a person who's been in the trenches. They come from a person who knows what it's like to suffer. And those are the kind of stories we listen to. I know from my own experience and the experience of others that sufferers listen to sufferers. They don't listen to people who haven't suffered. And so where I need to begin with you is I need to tell you my story so that you might have some way of sitting with me and we can listen to each other. We each have a story. I want to share mine with you. And it would be good for you to share your story with someone. Share it with God. Or find a person that you are close to share it with, or share it in the group. I'm honored to have the opportunity to share my story with you. I was married when I was 19. I know, young. But I'd already graduated from college, and my fiancée had graduated from college. So it was time to get married. She was 22, I was 19. And we had already decided what we wanted to do with our lives. We wanted to be missionaries in Germany. We had prepared ourselves. In fact, over the next 3 years, till I was 22, I pursued a master's degree and then another master's degree, preparing myself for Europe, and Sheila preparing herself for Europe as well. We were ready to go. We had a sponsoring church, but we did have one problem. We'd already had a miscarriage in our family. And Sheila had a condition called scoliosis of the spine. And this condition caused her a lot of pain. And the doctors told us that it'd be very difficult, if not impossible, for her to carry a child full term. And so we decided to have surgery. Sheila would undergo surgery to correct that curvature and give her the capacity to have children. And so that surgery was full of hope, relief of pain, have children, to be able then to go and do the mission of God as we had imagined it. We thought it was a good thing to do. And we prayed for health and for our future. 10 days after the surgery, while she's recovering at home, Sheila died of an embolism. I didn't know what to do with that. I had never even been to a funeral except one. I'd never been to a funeral of a close person, a close family friend. First death in our family, our immediate family at least. I did not know what to do with that. I was so distraught on the day of the funeral, they had to carry me out of the church. And I was so angry with God. I felt betrayed, like I'd been set up. God, we only wanted to serve you. Our whole life was planned for you, or at least so we thought. Maybe it really wasn't. Maybe something else was going on. Maybe that was something I needed to learn. I don't still understand it all, but I do know that I was angry. Over time, I was able to regain some balance in life, and I remarried. She already had a child, and so I married into a new family, and I adopted Ashley. And then we had two more children, Joshua and Rachel. And Joshua, we named him Joshua because we wanted him to be a leader among God's people. We thought about Jesus, but that's a little too much. I mean, Joshua is the Hebrew name for Jesus, so we just kind of slipped that one in there. But we really did want to give him a vision that he would be a leader among God's people. And we wanted to give Rachel a vision of her beauty in the way we thought of her as a beautiful girl. But Joshua didn't develop well, normally. Joshua never could say his ABCs, never could color between the lines, always hyperactive, got kicked out of kindergarten, Baptist kindergarten, by the way. He got kicked out for his hyperactivity and some of the things he did. He loved to smash things, and we knew something was wrong. In fact, we thought, we're going to visit this kid in San Quentin for the rest of our life. We didn't know what was wrong. We went to psychologists, psychiatrists, pediatricians, and then one day we were at a church that I was preaching at, just visiting preaching, not the regular preacher, and a nurse was visiting as well at that church. She took one look at Joshua and said, "You need to take him to a pediatric neurologist." Within a week, we were sitting in an office along with a geneticist. And they told us Joshua was not going to get better. He had a terminal condition. And over the next 10 years, we watched Joshua slowly die. He lost his mobility, he lost his ability to speak, and he died at the age of 16. My family didn't survive that death like many other families. We divorced. Part of that's certainly my fault. I was emotionally distant. I didn't know how to deal with my grief. Remember I told you I was carried out of the church? When I was carried out of the church, I was so embarrassed because when we came out of the church, the whole town seems like the whole town was outside the church. And I was so embarrassed. And I said, I will never be embarrassed again. I didn't cry at my son's funeral. And it caught up with me. And about 12 years ago, I finally learned how to grieve. And I redid my son's funeral in my home with close friends. And I bawled like a baby. Nobody's story is perfect. Nobody's story is filled with good. There's always some chaos and disorder. There's always some struggle. But that's my story. And that is why I hope you'll walk with me through the rest of the story. We all have a loss story, and we all have a faith story. Our loss stories are very different, no doubt. Some very traumatic, some very tragic, some about the loss of a job or the divorce or death, or we all have a loss story there. And we all have a faith story. Now, our faith story can be really different. Some have a faith story that is a struggle, a doubt, a question. Some have a faith story that's very deep and strong and lifelong. But it doesn't matter. We all have a lost story and we all have a faith story. And it's important to tell our stories. I told you my story, and it helps me to tell the story. I don't know if this is your experience or not, but my experience is that when I tell my lost story, it doesn't make the pain go away, but it does give me clarity on my path. And particularly when I'm sharing it with my community, when I'm sharing it with people who love me. I may know that God loves me, but really I only know when God loves me when other people love me. I need God in the flesh, you might say. I need God with skin on. And when you hear my story, it encourages me and helps me. So it's really important in community that we each tell our stories. That we tell our stories of loss and we tell our struggles with faith. And we see how those two intertwine. It's time to tell your story. And the more you tell your story, the more I think you'll understand about what God is doing in your life. The more I tell my story, it seems like, the more I understand. Though my understanding is always limited and certainly never enough. But you help me with that when you listen to my story. And you will help each other when you listen to each other's stories. So try that on for size. Take a moment and let everybody tell their story. Because God's listening. And God loves you.